Hello and welcome to Inside Edition, where we discuss national, regional and international issues in depth. The Kingdom of Bahrain has granted the use authorization to the COVID-19 vaccine developed by France's Valneva company after signing an advance purchase agreement for the supply of 1 million doses of VLA2001 in December last year. Such authorization follows a rolling review process with the Bahraini National Health Regulatory Authority, the NAHRA, and reflects its initiative to support the authorization of COVID-19 vaccines. To know more about that, we are pleased to be joined by Dr. Juan Carlos Jaramillo, Valneva's Chief Medical Officer.
In Scotland, we are currently manufacturing our Covid-19 vaccine. This vaccine is based on the platform that we use for our current commercial product in Livingston, which is a vaccine against Japanese encephalitis, and we've been manufacturing commercially now for over 10 years. The Covid vaccine that we are manufacturing is based on that technology. We initiate a batch by thawing cells, and then we inoculate with the virus. And we harvest the inoculum, which is essentially a liquid, and then we concentrate the virus down and we inactivate, purify and formulate with alum and CPG. So the skill set we have developed over the years from our commercial manufacturing we can now utilise for the Covid manufacturing.
I feel very humbled and very excited to be contributing to the global COVID-19 response. I think everybody at the moment really hopes that they can help and make a difference, and I like to think that I can help someone get in touch with their family or be able to go out or even just prevent them from getting the disease and save their life.
I take pride in the really high standards we work to. It's important work where we're helping to prevent deadly diseases across the world. The work we're doing here will allow me to see my grandpa sooner.
Welcome back. Joining me here in the studio is Dr. Juan Carlos Jaramillo from Valneva's, who is Valneva's Chief Medical Officer. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you for the invitation. Look forward to it.
Valneva is on the tongue of every single person right now in the medical community in Bahrain because it is a big introduction to Bahrain's COVID-19 fight. So what can you tell us about Valneva's first shipment to the Kingdom of Bahrain and what is the significance of this kind of cooperation with a company such as Valneva and the Kingdom of Bahrain?
Well, thank you for the question. First of all, as a company and for myself being the Chief Medical Officer, we're very proud that the Bahrainian authorities has accepted COVID-19 VLA2001 to be implemented in their national vaccine campaign. We believe that VLA2001 will bring a lot of benefits to Bahrainians, and again, we're very proud that the collaboration has gone extremely well and extremely fast.
Absolutely. Doctor, one of the things when we look at vaccines and the history of vaccines during COVID-19, there was a lot of coming and going because of the diversity of the vaccines that came out, and then effectively the 5 or 6 ones that were actually effective against different strains, and then of course the strains that have mutated into even stronger ones or ones that act differently. What can you tell us about Valneva's VLA2001? What kind of studies were done on it? How does it affect or how does it combat COVID-19 and help in it?
Yes, so what we've also done, at least from Valneva's perspective, just like other pharmaceutical companies, we also kept an eye out on new variants that are coming out, variants of concern. And one of the things that we have done is really looked into different type of laboratory testing to make sure that our VLA2001 vaccine does have the potential for cross-neutralization. So we tested against the Delta, which we showed 100% cross-neutralization. And then when the first Omicron variant came out, we've also did studies there where we reported 87% of cross-neutralization in the laboratories. What we're doing now is with the new BA2, which is the subvariant of the Omicron, we are now also in process of testing in order to make sure that VLA2001 does continue to show cross-neutralization against this variant.
Absolutely. When we look at the spread of COVID-19 all over the world, I mean, it is significant to mention that some areas COVID-19 was kept under control, or there were a lot of helping mechanisms that were put in place, whether by the government, by the healthcare sector. Vaccines are one of these mechanisms that were put in place. But why Bahrain? How does Bahrain come into the picture in basically acquiring the VLA 2001?
So it's quite interesting. We were approached through some contacts that we have, and basically I think we started our collaboration. I had the opportunity to present various times our clinical development program, our phase 1, phase 2 results, and our phase 3. And we were very surprised that the interactions went very quickly. What we really enjoyed is that the questions that were being asked about our program were dealt extremely fast. And I think that also helped the collaboration and to where we are today, where we received the emergency use authorization for VLA 2001.
Right, absolutely. Before we go into the nitty-gritties of the Valneva vaccine coming here to Bahrain, let's actually look at Valneva itself. The strategy of Valneva stems from its vision. Its vision indicates to contribute to a world in which no one dies or suffers from a vaccine-preventable disease. What can you tell us about the importance of a vision like that?
Yeah, so for us, I think the company, when it was started back in 2003, I believe, or 2008, sorry for that, we saw that we needed to focus on unmet medical needs, especially, and look at how can we develop vaccines to either prevent or treat. But Valneva, we are looking at diseases where, for example, chikungunya, Lyme disease, and now with VLA 2001.
Right.
We do have, of course, preclinical programs looking into HMPV, for example. Yeah. Zika, we also started developing when there was a Zika outbreak. So the company is really focusing how can we tackle these things, at least to add to the public health concerns that we experience. And the pandemic, I think, has taught us that we need to be prepared, and we also always have to find new innovative ways and new vaccines that could prevent any type of outbreaks in the future.
Absolutely. In medical laboratory work, such as the one that Valneva is doing, multidisciplinary teams are needed in order to tackle any kind of problem. As you've mentioned, yes. There are a lot of diseases out there that have a variety of symptoms and causes, and even a variety of outcomes at the end, some of them being fatal outcomes. So in order for a successful basically outcome from the company's studies, you need that kind of multidisciplinary team. Part of that is also cooperations with other companies.
Correct.
How important are these cooperations, and what are the standards that you have set in your cooperations with these companies?
Well, I can give you an example with VLA 2001. When we looked at what would be the best vaccine that Valneva can put out there to make sure that we have a product that will be viable and also support the public health needs with the COVID-19, we started looking at additional adjuvants. VLA 2001 is an inactivated. The difference that we have is that we have two adjuvants in it. We have alum and CpG 1018. And this is really around where scientifically strategy we looked internally of what can we bring to market and also make sure that we have a differentiation effect. So this is all collaborations, and you rightly said there are various teams that we work with internally, but also externally. I think we also have received great feedback from our scientific advisory board group that we work with constantly, and they also helped us, or at least gave us some scientific information on how to best develop VLA 2001.
Absolutely. Having established that, there is also a need to respond to the pandemic's consequences, providing an encouraging environment for medical research in all kinds of countries, but specifically also in Bahrain. This is usually done in order to further innovate the already existing treatments or vaccines. How do you value this positive reaction? How would it create a new way of global life standard to the VLA 2001?
Yeah, so I think the opportunity which Bahrain has given us to give us the emergency use authorization, and now having VLA 2001 in a real world setting once the vaccination campaign initiates, I think that also will help us to interact and also work with local KOLs, looking at additional studies that we can do with VLA 2001. And of course, look in the future of what other types of vaccines we could actually collaborate with the government here.
Absolutely. Can you give us an idea about the science behind on VLA 2001 and its efficacy in combating COVID-19?
Yes, so it's a great question. Again, VLA 2001, as I mentioned, is an inactivated vaccine. Yes. It's double adjuvanted. As you know, inactivated vaccines have been around for more than 70 years. They've been used for flu, polio, for example. So it's a very well-established platform, a safe vaccine, and that's also one of the reasons we move forward with the development of VLA 2001. And I think, again, as I mentioned before, having alum and the extra adjuvant CpG 1018 has allowed us to show very good results in preclinical setting, but also from our phase 1 and phase 3 results, which allowed us now to get the emergency use authorization, and we are expecting hopefully more regulatory approvals in the weeks coming.
Right. When we talk about adjuvants, just to bring it closer to the viewers that might not be from the medical field, what is the actual difference as a professional that the client or the patient at the end would actually notice or not notice? Is it them that notice it, or basically the healthcare providers that know the differences?
It's usually the healthcare providers. The adjuvants, what they do is that they boost up or stimulate the immune system in order to develop the right antibodies in that sense, which actually can then translate to longer protection, better protection, and that's why also our strategy to include 2 adjuvants in order to make sure that we had an efficacious and an immunogenic vaccine. That was our main goal.
Absolutely. When we talk about clinical studies that are being run on different vaccines, all of the vaccines on the market have clinical studies running. So this is not something different, but what I feel is important to mention is during these clinical studies, there is always a team that is there that observes, an observatory team that is able to answer the questions that clients might have. And we are in the age, not just due to the pandemic, but the pandemic sort of boosted it in the social media age, where people basically go to social media to ask these questions. So from your point of view, what are the most questions that have been varied and asked when it comes to VL 2001?
I think for me, interesting, and you're correctly said, so we have teams that work on this. We work with CROs, which help us to conduct our clinical trials. One of the most of the questions that we get is people wanting to participate in our clinical trial, knowing that at least from a technical perspective, being an inactivated vaccine, they feel a bit more confident than the new platforms that have been arised, for example, the mRNAs. So that is quite interesting for us. And then, like you rightly said, social media actually has helped not only Valneva, but other companies to recruit individuals, answer the questions that the individuals have. And I think that also we were able to address some concerns that people had in joining clinical trials. What would the outcomes be? Explain a little bit more around the rationale of a clinical study, and also how we follow the individuals, not only after their second vaccination, but up to 12 months, for example, because we collect safety data, information on how their well-being is, and so forth. So it's a great way that we can communicate with the audience, of course, but at least I do see that it gives them the ability to understand more on the clinical development programs and the clinical trials that we're conducting.
Yes, clinical development is the key word for my next question. The VLA 2001 has a lot of potential for growth in the future, especially against the different variants that might come up. And with the history of COVID until now, it's been 2 years, but we've seen a lot. The variants are keep on coming and mutating. So tell us a little bit about the potential for the change in VLA 2001 against different variants.
Yeah, so right now our strategy is, of course, monitor any types of new variants of concern. Again, as soon as we have identified or learned a new variant of concern, what we have done now is making sure that we do these laboratory tests to make sure that the current VLA 2001 can show cross-neutralization in a lab setting. But of course, internally, we're also looking at other clinical development strategies. You know, do we need to build a bivalent, for example? Do we need to look at a flu combo, for example? Right now, the science, I would say, it would tell us in the future, but right now it's a crystal ball. We don't know yet what would be the future. What we are awaiting is that once this pandemic setting calms down, we go into the endemic, and then there will come the questions in, how would a booster look like? What is the appropriate booster? What's the time frame for a boostering to give to individuals? So again, we are thinking in this in the background, and if there is a need, and if there are requests from customers, meaning governments or ministries of health, for example, that they would want us to look into the development of a new, let's say, strain or a bivalent combination. Of course, we're more than happy to collaborate on that.
Absolutely. One of the things that actually happens in situations like this is once the vaccine is out and it is on the market, studies into the demographics of the countries where the vaccine goes is also part of the clinical study. So what can you tell us about the importance of demographic studies in applying this vaccine and in the outcomes of the data that you collect from that? Yeah,
so again, coming back to the Bahrainian emergency use authorization, Bahrain will also be the first country where we could have real-world evidence from individuals that have been vaccinated with VLA 2001. And that will give us also the opportunity to look at that demographic and look at additional data. And we'll also be collecting post-marketing safety surveillance, for example. So I think right now with this emergency use approval, there are a lot of things that we're looking forward to continue to collaborate with the government and also with different experts at this level. And we do see future potential studies being conducted here in Bahrain.
Yeah. Some of the questions that are usually asked in combination or in relation to vaccines, as I've mentioned in the beginning, there are certain vaccines that are on the market against COVID-19. They're very well known. We have the Pfizer-BioNTech, we have the AstraZeneca or the Oxford vaccine, as well as the other ones that are available. In relation with VLA 2001 and these vaccines, because most of the people are already vaccinated, how is that kind of combination going to happen? Is there a study that went in on that? Is there a collaboration between Valneva and these companies in order to have a better outcome or a clearer outcome at the end?
Yeah, so it's an excellent question. I mean, while we're still in this pandemic setting, in order to do mix and match studies, which we actually are going to set up now, what we call heterologous studies. We are looking at conducting them. For example, we have some meetings with some KOLs here in Bahrain to look at the possibility for that. We're looking also in other regions. As the pandemic is ongoing and more people get vaccinated, of course, starting initial or different clinical trials get more challenging. But we are looking at VLA 2001 in a heterologous setting, meaning either individuals that have been vaccinated with an mRNA or inactivated or a VLP, and those are the studies that we're planning to do in the coming months.
Planning to do them in the coming months, does that not mean yet that you don't have the data? The data is already there, it's just the confirmation of the data that you already have.
So from our phase 3 trial, we do have a heterologous results that's pending within the next couple months, where these are individuals that were primed with VLA 2001 and given a booster. And we also have the individuals that were primed with the AstraZeneca and then given a booster with VLA 2001. And that's where we will be able to show data from that. But we do want to do additional trials also to compare ourselves what would be VLA 2001's booster capabilities against an mRNA, for example.
That's amazing. When we talk about these kind of things and the era of technology we're in, it's really the information that is the gold mine at the end. And this is how information is collected in order at the end to have an outcome that is beneficial for humanity in general. How can VLA 2001 be a top consideration as a booster shot in addition to actually providing all kinds of protections to the primary two shots that were taken?
Yes. So we were able to show from our phase 1, phase 2, we also had an arm where we included a booster, and we saw that data that we have already published, and actually it's part of what we submitted to the regulatory agencies, that our booster after primarying with VLA 2001 actually showed a high immunogenic response, meaning that VLA 2001 has the ability to boost the individuals and of course look at protection. One of the things that we're now looking at, which a lot of governments and a lot of scientific experts are wanting to understand a little bit more, is the duration of the immune from that.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's something also that we will be generating in the next couple months to show that VLA 2001 has persistence of
immunization.
Immunization, exactly.
Yeah. All right. When we talk about the VLA 2001 and its application here in Bahrain, it's actually very important what you just said, because in the beginning of the pandemic, that was actually all of the headlines in the media was, 21 days, then the incubation period is over, and then you are immune for we don't know how long, because the data is not out. But now we do have solid data that confirms this kind of information. When a vaccine comes into a country, let's specify our kingdom, because we know our medical system and our health ministry and the high standards they've set for anything that comes in. What can you tell us about the process of introducing the vaccine and having it basically approved through the ministry? How was that experience?
So again, the Bahrainian government reached out to us, and they gave us the opportunity to present the clinical data. Of course, due to the traveling restrictions, everything was done by video, teleconference and so forth. And basically, we presented all of our preclinical phase 1, phase 2 results, phase 3. And it was just basically us submitting the dossier with all the data that we had available. And of course, there were some questions back and forth where we had to address them. And again, it worked out extremely well. I think the questions were very straightforward. And of course, I think the Bahrainian Ministry of Health and regulatory bodies really were focused on the key messaging, or at least key data that VLA 2001 has provided up to date. And I think this is where we are today with the emergency use authorization.
Absolutely. One of the pride and joys of us in Bahrain is Team Bahrain, the team that was initially headed or is still headed by His Royal Highness the Crown Prince of Bahrain, and the team that actually took care of everything that had to do from the medical issues to the economic issues to people's actual livelihood. So there were so many departments in this. But Team Bahrain always had this forefront in explaining to the people and making them aware of anything new coming on the market. And these people are also the people that are heading the medical team we have. What can you tell us about the awareness approaches that should be taken in the Kingdom of Bahrain in order to make people more aware about VLA 2001?
No, it's an excellent question. I do know, of course, seeing media, reading, and so forth, that communication is key important. And where you see successful, let's say, pandemic control, or at least COVID-19 control, is where there has been a campaign of awareness. And I think that the Bahrainian government has done an extraordinary job in that sense. And this is also where we will also be supporting, if needed, about more information about VLA 2001 as soon as we have additional data. The authorities will receive it right away. And again, it's around the open communication, and I think that was a great strategy that the government implemented.
Yes. Bahrain is also the business hub of the GCC, so to say it's the doorway into the GCC. And Valneva's future depends on a lot of the outcomes of the vaccine that is being introduced here. What can you tell us about your future relations and prospective plans in Bahrain as well as the GCC region?
Yeah, so we are now in constant communications and interactions with different governmental bodies. And for us, I think it was key to have the first approval from Bahrain, which I think will then have a domino effect for the rest of the countries. We're getting more requests to present, to share our data, and also to submit our regulatory dossier. So we're very enthusiastic of trying to support the region, and Valneva will commit to itself that if a country does want VLA 2001, we'll be able to deliver to them.
That's amazing. Thank you very much for being with us. We've almost gotten to the end of the show today. Just before I let you go, I just want to have a perspective answer from you when it comes to the future of Valneva 2001 and the upgrading of it. Is there like a certain timeline that you guys have set? Is there an observation body? You've already mentioned there are people going to be observing here, but is there like a collaboration between the local institutions or hospitals or the Ministry of Health in getting that data out and then progressing as we come?
Yeah, it's all around the communication that we have. I think internally, we do have let's say, a specific point where we would need to make a decision. But again, it goes back to more of obtaining scientific advice, not only with experts in the field, but also with regulatory agencies, really to understand what is the next. Would a bivalent vaccine be the appropriate one? Would be a monovalent, just the Omicron alone? There are companies that are doing different strategies, but again, I believe it comes back to the whole communication and how transparent and how you're able to communicate new data that's coming in, and that will allow us to really look at strategic point of view of what needs to be developed for the next, let's say, wave.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being with
us
and answering our questions. And thanks for making time for this very important subject.
Thank you.
And I'd also like to thank you, dear viewers, for watching us, and we'll see you next week in another episode of Inside Edition.